I'd like to call the Committee on Housing to order. Good morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day. It's great to see people in this room and then to have this hybrid format also. So thank you all for being here. Today is Thursday, March 17th, 9 a.m. We're doing this via video conference and we're here in conference room 423, the state capitol. The first item on today's agenda is SB 2898, which is the HCDA establishes a transit-oriented development infrastructure improvement district under the HCDA. First up today, we have Ian Hirokawa from the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Okay, should we go to the next one? Kevin Moore from DLNR. Russell Tsuji from DLNR. All three in support. Craig Nakamoto from Hawaii Community Development Authority.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair and members of the committee. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you as well. Craig Nakamoto, Interim Executive Director for Hawaii Community Development Authority, and we stand on our written testimony in support of Senate Bill 2898 SD2. Thank you very much, Chair and Vice Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you, Craig. Next up, we have Rodney Funakoshi from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Morning, Chair Nakamura, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Rodney Funakoshi from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. OPSD stands on our testimony in strong support. We do defer to HCDA on our suggestion for staff funding. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. We have late testimony from Craig Hirai from the Department of Budget and Finance. With comments. And the other three are with comments. Curtis Lum, Department of Planning and Permitting with comments, and Pamela Tumpat from the Maui Chamber of Commerce in opposition. Members, are there any questions? I have a question for Rodney. I'd like to know, Rodney, the city and county of Honolulu expressed concerns that this bill may not be needed based on some of the work that's being done in Liliha at the Liliha Civic Center area, where the state and the county are already coordinating on the infrastructure. Can you respond to that concern?
Yes. It is for TLD areas, but this would be as needed. And so it's not automatically for every TLD area or potential TLD area. So that's my understanding. So if an area is already adequately served or planned for infrastructure, then it need not be part of this, or the TLD district need not be established.
Great. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Okay, let's go on to the next item, which is SB 2922 SD2 relating to rural districts. This authorizes the counties to adopt ordinances that allow up to one house per quarter acre in rural districts. First up, we have Rodney Funakoshi from the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Hey, good morning again, Chair, members, and the Office of Planning stands on its testimony in support of this measure. We do have an amendment that we would like to propose to delay partial implementation of the quarter acre until the study is initiated. So with that, we fully support the measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Scott Derrickson from the State Land Use Commission. In opposition, we have Craig Hirai, Department of Budget and Finance, and Phyllis Shimabukuro Geyser from the Department of Agriculture.
Morning, Chair Nakamura. Just Morris Sata on behalf of the department. Our testimony is nearly identical to the Rodney's, OPSD testimony. That we definitely support the study, and we recommend that the implementation of the reclassification allowance be delayed until the impacts become better known from the study that is being requested of OPSD. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there, there's also testimony from Zendo Kern from the County of Hawaii Planning Department in support, Kupuna for the Mo'opuna in opposition, Ken Hiraki in support, and Joe Kent from the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii with comments. Are there any questions, members? Seeing none, we'll go to the next item on the agenda. SB 2504 SD2 relating to the Hawaii Public Housing Authority. This establishes a landlord incentive program special fund to reimburse landowners who participate in certain housing voucher programs for repair costs and tenant-caused property damage. First up, we have Hakeem Wensafi from the Hawaii Public Housing Authority.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. The Housing Authority stands on its testimony in support. Thank you.
Thank you. We have testimony from Scott Morishige, Governor's Coordinator on Homelessness.
Oh, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members. I'll stand on my written testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
We have Daintree Bartoldes, State Council on Developmental Disabilities.
Good morning. We stand on testimony in support.
Thank you. Craig Hirai with comments, Angela Mercado in support, Betty Lou Larson, Catholic Charities Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. I'm Betty Lou Larson, representing Catholic Charities Hawaii. We stand in support of this, especially with the flexible funding that's now being provided. We feel that will give HPHA the opportunity over the years to find the most creative ways to address these needs. And we totally agree that we have to look at the concerns of landlords to make this program more effective. And I think this bill will achieve that, because we don't want to lose these tens of millions of dollars of federal funding that come into our state. So thank you very much for this bill.
Thank you. Laura Thielen, Partners in Care.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Bob Wardlaw for Partners in Care. I'm here representing Laura and the agency. We stand in strong support, and just also want to highlight that this also gives landlords peace of mind knowing that service providers are there to help them, de-escalate situations and help deal with any other issues that might arise. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Ken Hiraki in support. Ashley Galakak in support, and Nichols Leverens in support. Members, any questions? Okay. And let's go on to the next bill, which is SB 2504 SD2. No, that was that one. SB 2581 SD1 establishes a priority guideline for the provision of affordable housing leased to the federal government and under federal government control. First up, we have Rodney Funakoshi, Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Good morning, everyone. Rodney Funakoshi, OPSD stands on its testimony in support of the measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Russell Tsuji, Department of Land and Natural Resources.
Morning, Chair, members of the committee, Russell Tsuji for DLNR. We provided comments and we'll stand on our comments and available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Next, we have Luke Sarvis from DLNR. And
DLNR is all with me, Chair.
okay, got it. And late comments from John Kawamoto in support. Members, any questions? Okay, so let's go to the next item, which is SB 2479 relating to broadband infrastructure in each public housing project, dwelling unit, and state low-income housing project. The first up, we have Hakeem Wansafi from the Hawaii Public Housing Authority.
Aloha again, Chair, Vice Chairs, members of the committee. The Housing Authority stands in support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Bert Lum, DBEDT, in support. Daintree Bartoldes, State Council on Developmental Disabilities.
We stand in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy Ma, Common Cause Hawaii, in support. Janine Suki, Hawaiian Telcom.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Hawaiian Telecom stands in support of this bill.
Thank you. With David Miyashiro from Hawaii Broadband Hui in support, and Audrey Suga Nakagawa from AARP Hawaii in support. Does anyone else want to testify? Okay, are there any questions, members? Okay, let's go to the next bill. Is SB 2251 SD2 allows the Hawaii Public Housing Authority to develop mixed income and mixed finance housing projects. First up, we have Hakeem Wansafi, Hawaii Public Housing Authority.
Chair, Vice Chairs, member of the committee, thank you again for hearing this bill. We stand in strong support. As you know, the federal government has shied away in the last many years from having concentration of poverty in one certain area. This clear language will allow us, as we redevelop public housing, to also have other kind of incomes so we don't concentrate the poverty. Thank you again for hearing this bill. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Aloha.
Thank you. Next up, Craig Hirai, Department of Budget and Finance. With comments, Sylvia Hussey, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, in opposition. Is there anyone from OHA that would like to testify this time? Ken Hiwaki, Hawaii Realtors, in support. And we also have testimony from Anne Frederick, Hawaii Action Alliance for Progressive Action, in opposition, Kupuna for the Mo'opuna in opposition, and late testimony from John Kawamoto in support. Okay, would anyone else like to testify? Any questions, members? Okay. Let's go to the next bill, which is SB 879 SD1, relating to counties. It gives counties jurisdiction over the infrastructure of DHHL housing developments in their boundaries under specific conditions. First up, we have William Ayla Jr. from DHHL.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Tyler Kipple-Gomes, Deputy Director for the Department of Hawaii Homeland, standing on our written testimony in strong support.
Thank you, Tyler. Next, we have Kathleen Mitchell from the Board of Water Supply.
Yes, Chair. Kathy Mitchell, the Board of Water Supply. We stand on our written testimony offering comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Melody Aduha from the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, in support. Would anyone else like to testify? Any questions, members? Not, let's go to the next item, which is SB 2877 SD1. This is relating to the residential landlord-tenant code. This is the one that allows the landlord or landlord's agent to charge an application screening fee at the time a rental application is processed for residential property. First up, we have Scott Morishige, Governor's Coordinator on Homelessness.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. Scott Morishige, Governor's Coordinator on Homelessness and Chair of the Hawaii Interagency Council on Homelessness. I'll start on my testimony in support and note that the regulation of application screening fees is a priority of the Hawaii Interagency Council on Homelessness. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kathy Betts, Department of Human Services. In support, Daintree Bartoldes, State Council on Development of Disabilities.
Chair, we stand in support.
Thank you. Stephen Levens, DCCA Office of Consumer Protection.
Good morning. We stand in support.
Thank you. Kevin Carney, EAH Housing with comments. Kristen Alice, Hope Services Hawaii. In support, Betty Lou Larson, Catholic Charities Hawaii.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. I'm Betty Lou Larson with Catholic Charities Hawaii. We stand in strong support of this bill. We support that everyone should have the chance to apply for housing, and multiple application fees are needed in this tight market in order to achieve any rental unit. We feel that this impacts not only lower income people, but Ellis families who are in need of housing and may have to apply 10, 15, 20 times to find an apartment. So that number of applications really not only impacts on the person's ability to apply, but it impacts on any savings they might have for the first month's rent and the deposit. So they're using up that money in advance. We also support one reasonable fee per application. Landlords could still screen all the members. So if there was an elderly person with a pension in the family or 2 or 3 working people, of course they could still be screened, but there would just be one reasonable fee for that household. We thank you for listening to this bill. We think it is a very important bill for people to achieve housing. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Shirley David, St. Michael, the Archangel Church in Kailua Kona in support. Ken Hiraki, Hawaii Realtors.
Thank you for allowing me to testify. We oppose Senate Bill 2877 ST1. We much rather prefer the approach taken by your committee, House Bill 2139 HD1. And the bill that's drafted, has some unintended consequences, I think. I mean, it discriminates against those with multifamily living because of high rents in Hawaii. If you have a mother and daughter, for example, who want to apply for a unit and they have a family, if you limit it to just one fee or one background check for the entire application, that would disqualify almost that applicant, because the one applicant may not be able to qualify solely on their income and background, but if you have 2 of them, because rents are so high, you need to combine their income and background in order to qualify. So once you put a cap of just 1, then the unintended consequences, multi-generational family living would probably be disqualified. Also at University of Hawaii, if you have students, for example, who want to rent a house and there's 4 rooms in there, you need the income from all 4 to qualify, because one student alone can't qualify. So again, you would disadvantage them and put them at the end of the line. So I don't know if this is well thought out as far as the unintended consequences. Also, when it comes to screening reports for property managers, it's marked confidential, and it cannot be distributed because it includes criminal background checks, credit reports, eviction history, those kind of things, and to require that you have to send it out via email or mail to some unknown address or person, to me, is a violation of the confidentiality of that information. Very, very dangerous. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ken. Next up is David Chi, attorney at law. In opposition, and Nikos Leverens, Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center in support. Would anyone else like to testify on this measure? Okay. Are there any questions? I have a question for Scott Morishige or Betty Lou Larson. I just want to ask the question regarding the concern about multiple adults needing to qualify and the costs, the real costs that would be incurred. Do you feel that the property manager should then just eat that cost?
I think the cost of screening tenants is a cost of doing business for this type of industry. I think looking at the impact it has on the most vulnerable individuals that we're working with, many of the households who are now falling into homelessness are large multi-generational households, have multiple adults in the home. And if they have to apply to multiple units and pay a separate screening fee for each adult member of the household, that stacks up pretty quickly. And it really makes it even more challenging for them to pursue new housing opportunities. And as we look at what the impacts of the pandemic are on the population that we work with and those who are housing insecure, it really is a concern. And that's why we're prioritizing these particular type of measures to try and really reduce these upfront barriers to accessing the housing that we do have.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Okay, let's go to the next item agenda, which is SB 3324 SD2. This is relating to establishing a working group to address the problem of infrastructure repair and maintenance in planned housing divisions that do not have a compulsory community association. First up, we have Joshua Jacobs, an individual in support. With late testimony from Sheldon Lehman in support and Patty Pinto in support. There's no one here to testify. So let's move on to the next item, which is SB 2667 SD1 relating to affordable housing, extending the deadline for HHFDC to negotiate an existing or issue a new ground lease for the Front Street apartments on Maui. First up, we have Denise Iseri Matsubara from HHFDC.
Good morning, Chair Nakamura, Vice Chair Hashimoto, members of the committee, Denise Matsubara for HHFDC. HHFDC stands on its written testimony in support, and we request an amendment to strike out the 5-year deadline on page 3, as the judge has already ruled for this project that the LIHTC restrictions remain. However, the project owner earlier this year filed an appeal to remove that, and an appraisal is required for this type of transaction. And knowing that HHFDC has no control over when the courts will act, we respectfully ask that that 5-year deadline be removed so that the state is in the best position during negotiations. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Denise. Next up, we have Alice Lee from the County Council of Maui in support. Would anyone else like to testify on this measure? Any questions, members? Let's go to the next item, which is SB 3247 SD2 relating to, this requires the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to build rental units, apartments, and rent with option to buy housing units to address housing needs of Native Hawaiians. First up, we have William Isla Jr. from DHHL.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Tether Kipagom's Deputy Director for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. We submitted written testimony offering comments. I would add additional comments in that the language of this particular bill issues a mandate for the department to do something that it already does. We already develop rentals and affordable housing in the manner that the bill calls for, which means that the only issue within the text of the bill is really what it means to build sufficient levels of those, which we've offered context in our written comments. What I would also add, however, is that the language of this bill sort of as a standalone state measure that mandates we shall construct these types of units it's potentially more restrictive than the language of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, which is the authority, and without the context of the other obligations that the department has under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. Potentially, the language of the bill as written creates additional conflict because it doesn't give guidance as to, for example, what the department should do if it spends its energy and resources developing housing units or housing resources that are not rental housing, apartment units, rent with option to buy, right? It doesn't offer the department any guidance how to balance its existing constitutional and federal obligations under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act against a more restrictive state measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, we have Craig Iha from the Department of Attorney General.
Good morning, Chair Nakamura, members of the committee. We're concerned that the bill might be interpreted as creating an implied private right of action for individuals to be able to sue the state and DHHL if DHHL doesn't develop the kinds of units that is set forth in the bill, which could, of course, lead to tremendous unintended consequences. And so we don't presume that the legislature intends this. And we offer clarifying amendments in our written testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your suggestions. Next up, we have Laverne Moore, an individual in support. Would anyone else like to testify? Okay, then let's go on to the final measure, SB 206, SD2, relating to rental discrimination. First up, we have Hakeem Wansafi from HPHA.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. We stand in support of this measure. We believe that it's a nice balance to the previous bills that provides incentives. And I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Scott Morishige, Governor's Coordinator on Homelessness.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. I'll send my written testimony in support. And similar to HBJ, I believe that this bill offers a balance in combination with the incentives proposed in other measures. And note that this bill is also a priority for the Hawaii Interagency Council on Homelessness. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up, we have Robin Wurtzel, Hawaii Civil Rights Commission.
Chair Nakamura, Vice Chair Hashimoto, I'm not sure if people can hear me. I'm having a lot of trouble.
We can hear you. We can't see you though. Oh, we just lost you.
Wait.
We can see you and hear you now.
Oh, good. That's an improvement since I can't seem to see myself. But so sorry. Hawaii Civil Rights Commission stands on its written testimony in support of this measure, and we urge you to pass it on to the next committee. It's been many years in coming. We're available for questions if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Daintree Bartoldes, State Council on Developmental Disabilities.
Thank you. We stand on our testimony in support.
Thank you. Kathy Betts, Department of Human Services.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Joseph Campos, Deputy Director, Department of Human Services, here on behalf of Director Betts. The department stands on its written testimony in support of this measure, and we are available for questions if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. We have late testimony from Kara Jabola Carolus, Hawaii State Commission on the Status of Women. Okay. In support, Robin Wurtzel, Kristen Alice, Hope Services Hawaii.
Aloha, my name is Kristen Alice. I'm here on behalf of Hope Services Hawaii. We're a homeless services provider on Hawaii Island, and I'm standing in strong support of this measure. It's been a long time coming, as a previous testifier has said, and we see this in the work that we do. When I speak with the housing locators, whose job it is to find homes for people who are overcoming homelessness or avoiding homelessness to locate a new home, they're telling me that they're unable to find enough places, not even close to enough places to house the people who are on vouchers, who have received their vouchers, they have their deposit ready, they're employed, they're ready to get back on their own 2 feet and be responsible tenants. But unfortunately, the discrimination against even giving these people an interview is preventing people from getting into housing, and it's directly causing more homelessness. So I urge you to please pass this bill. And I just want to emphasize that importance of making sure that that discrimination, the act of discrimination, is fully prohibited, and that it's punishable by a fine that is high enough to dissuade landlords from continuing this practice. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. I appreciate your work to end homelessness.
Thank you. Next up, we have Cheryl Prince, Ko'olafoco Hawaiian Civic Club in support, Angela Mercado, Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence in support, Nicole Wu, HCAN Speaks in support, Betty Lou Larson, Catholic Charities Hawaii.
Aloha, Chair Nakamura, Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm Betty Lou Larson, representing Catholic Charities Hawaii. We again feel that this is a very critical bill to balance the needs of tenants with the concerns of landlords. We fully support the incentives. This is the other half. Unfortunately, as long as discrimination is allowed, we find that landlords often do an automatic screening out. We've all seen the no Section 8, et cetera, ads. So with this bill, it would give a chance for an elder, a working parent, a veteran to at least speak to a landlord. We're not saying that the landlord has to take them, but they'd have that opportunity. And the landlord could then learn about that there are these incentives. Mom and pops may not know unless someone tells them, hey, we can give you these benefits if you want to work with Section 8. And we're trying to remove some of those barriers to Section 8. We feel that there are many Ellis folks who get Section 8. It's not only the homeless or the very low income, because Section 8 actually serves a wide range of incomes. And again, they're the people who are struggling and need to have stable housing for their children to be healthy. And so we really feel that this is an important bill that would have a direct impact on these single parents especially, and on all our community to really be fully housed as much as possible. Thank you very much for listening to this bill.
Thank you, Betty Lou. Next up, we have Laura Thielen, Partners in Care.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity. Partners in Care. My name is Bob Wardlaw. I'm here for Laura Thielen. Partners in Care stands in strong support of this bill, and we want to highlight that Honolulu remains one of the largest metropolitan areas in the United States that does not have such a policy preventing discrimination for the source of income. And we believe that often contributes to our high levels of housing insecurity here in Hawaii. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Shirley David, St. Michael's, and Ken Hiraki, Hawaii Realtors.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for allowing me to testify. The Hawaiian Association of Realtors supports efforts to strengthen the Section 8 program, but is opposed to SB 206 ST2 because the measure does not address at all the underlying reasons why Section 8 voucher holders are disadvantaged when looking for housing. I was fortunate to be a member of the House Committee interim efforts to undertake a thoughtful, human-centered approach, trying to get at the root of the problem. The committee identified so-called friction points where the Section 8 requirements disadvantages through no fault of their own, both a Section 8 voucher holder and a housing provider vis-a-vis a non-voucher holder. As an example of a friction point, if there's a Section 8 voucher holder and a non-voucher holder applying for the same unit, it's common in this competitive housing market for the non-voucher holder to be able to take the unit on the same day. Unfortunately, because of the Section 8 red tape, it takes weeks to have an application approved and the unit inspected. During this time, the unit sits empty and the housing provider loses forever the rent for the period it takes the application to be approved, which creates an unfairness to the housing provider versus a non-voucher holder who can pay right away. In addition, once Section 8 approves an application, it takes months before the housing provider issues the first check. This is another friction point for housing providers who still have mortgages and maintenance fees to pay and disadvantages Section 8 voucher holders versus non-voucher holders who can pay on a timely basis. Many housing providers are willing to rent to Section 8 tenants, but simply can't afford to because of the governmental red tape involved. One of our guest speakers in the working group was UH Professor Dr. Philip Garbodin, who's a professor of affordable housing. His advice on the best way to provide a long-term solution to this issue: fix the problems. Senate Bill 206 SD2 does nothing to fix the problems by leveling the playing field between Section 8 and non-Section 8 applicants. Instead, masks over the problems with mandates and punitive penalties of $5,000 in attorney fees. In Hawaii, the supermajority of housing providers are mom and pops, uncles and aunties whose rent to supplement their retirement income. If this measure passes, will likely be the targets of lawsuits given the financial incentives and especially awarding of attorneys' fees. The Section 8 program provides a really important social good, but why is it designed in a way that disadvantages both the housing providers who are willing to lend a helping hand, as well as tenants who the program is intended to help? In closing, instead of punitive approach taken in SB 206, we support the approach taken in HB 1752 HD3, which instead of masking over the problems, instead attempts to fix the problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Next up is Hope Kirpelman, ACLU of Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Hope Kirpelman. I'm the Legal and Legislative Fellow with the ACLU of Hawaii. So the ACLU of Hawaii strongly supports this bill. Housing discrimination based on source of income is a huge problem in our state still. You can see this by looking at the rental websites like Craigslist, where you can easily find numerous posts a day that list apartments with descriptions that say Section 8 not accepted. That's just a sample of the explicit discrimination in this area. So allowing this type of discrimination actually renders important housing programs like Section 8 largely ineffective. One of the main intended benefits of this type of housing assistance is that it makes the actual existing vacant housing stock affordable, as opposed to having to create new affordable units to fill the need. This is an important resource that we need to be able to tap into. Long-term housing vouchers have also been proven to lead to extremely positive housing stability outcomes for families experiencing houselessness. We still have one of the worst houselessness rates in the country in Hawaii, and vouchers and other programs like these are supposed to help fix the problem. But if landlords can refuse to rent to all of these tenants, they essentially have a veto over the programs. Voucher recipients are left with very few options for housing, if any at all, and they can lose their voucher if they can't find a home before it expires. Federal law does not protect against this kind of discrimination, and that's why numerous other states, cities, and counties have already passed ordinances prohibiting this kind of behavior. There's evidence that these laws are effective as well. Voucher holders in areas with these laws have already reported higher rates of success in finding an apartment. It's time to bring this reform to Hawaii. Other testifiers have mentioned it's been many years in the making, and for these reasons, the ACLU of Hawaii very strongly supports this measure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hope. Next up, we have Abby Seitz from Planning for Community LLC.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Abby Seitz. I own and manage Planning for Community LLC. We consult on affordable housing and transportation, and I'm here testifying in strong support for this measure, which prohibits discrimination against voucher holders. I'd like to highlight that housing vouchers, which are critical in allowing tenants the autonomy to choose where they live and the security of knowing that they only need to spend 30% of their income on housing, is one of the most effective tools that we have to keep folks housed in Hawaii. It's also one of the most powerful anti-poverty alleviation tools in the United States, with it lifting an estimated 3 million people out of poverty each year. Unfortunately, like many of my colleagues have discussed, a large majority of landlords in Hawaii and throughout the United States will not accept voucher holders in the tenant approval process, in part due to the stigma of Section 8. These discriminatory practices, which are sadly still legal under our current system, keep thousands of voucher holders housing insecure and houseless, and also can dehumanize our island's most vulnerable. While I believe ending housing voucher discrimination is not the silver bullet to ending the affordable housing crisis in Hawaii, we still need to be making these investments in public housing. It's critical to take this step to better use our existing federal resources, as well as keep our folks housed in our island state. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Abby. Next up, we have Samantha Church, Family Promise Hawaii. David Chi, attorney at law. No? Okay, let's go to Kenna Stormo Gibson.
I would back up.
Can you go to the?
I would just echo what all the
identify
previous
yourself?
testifiers have said. And I wanted to clarify, Dr. Phil Garboden, I think his quote was taken out of context by the Board of Realtors. I've spoken to him at length. He's very supportive of this bill, but we will be sure to have his testimony next time. Yeah, so thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And there's 13 other letters that we received in support. They're not going to be showing up to testify. Would anyone else like to testify on this measure? Any questions, members? Okay, seeing none, we will recess for decision making. Reconvening the Housing Committee for decision making. First item on the agenda is SB 2898 SD2 relating to, this is the HCDA TOD bill. We'd like to move this out as an HD1, making technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency and style. Any questions, members, concerns? Okay, Vice Chair, let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2898 SD2 HD1. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Aquino. Aye. Representative Clark.
Aye.
Representative Iligan. Aye. Representative Kitagawa.
Aye.
Representative Lepresti is excused. Representative Takumi. Aye. Representative McDermott is excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. The next item is SB 2922 SD2 relating to rural districts. I'm going to ask Vice Chair to discuss the amendments.
Thank you, Chair. We are going to adopt the Office of Planning amendments, which is essentially amending Section 9. So it'll read that Section 4 to 7 shall take effect on July 1, 2050, and Sections 2 and 3 shall take effect on July 1, 2051. So we'll call out the two sections and we'll have a effective date to continue the discussion.
Thank you. So thank you. We're going to move that out as an HD1.
And we'll allow staff to make technical and non-substantive revisions.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move it out as an HD1. Let's take any questions or concerns. Okay, let's take the vote.
All right, recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2922 SD2 with amendments. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, noting the excuse of Representative LaPresti and McDermott, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. The next item is SB 2504 SD2 relating to the Public Housing Authority. This is the landlord incentive program. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Hashimoto to discuss our amendments.
All right, so SB 2504, we are essentially going to take the amendments that the House made in Bill HB 1754, and we're going to insert it into SB 2504. And just as a refresher, this is our Housing Choice Landlord Incentive Program that was in HB 1752. This will add in reimbursements for up to 1 month of rent at the current contract rate when the dwelling unit sits vacant. It also allows incentive signing up bonus of 1 month rent when they first sign up into the Section 8 program. We will continue the reimbursement program if damages exceed the security deposits. And we will also add back in the positions as an SB 1752, HB 1752 to allow HPHA to do inspections within 15 days. So again, this is consistent with HB 1752 HD3. Will allow staff to make technical and non-substantive revisions.
Thank you. So we're going to move it out as an HD1. Any comments? Okay, let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2504 SD2 with amendments, noting the excuse of Representative LaPresti and McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. The next item is SB 2581 SD1. This is the military surplus land bill for housing. The recommendation is to pass this out as a HD1, technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Any comments? Let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2581 SD1 with amendments, noting the excuse of Representative LaPresti and McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. The next item is SB 2479 relating to broadband infrastructure in affordable housing. Recommendation is to pass as is. Any comment? Let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2479. And the recommendation is to pass as is, noting the excuse of Representative LaPresti and McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Okay, the next item is SB 2251. This is the mixed use, mixed income development authority for the Public Housing Authority. We'd like to move this as an HD1 with technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. And conforming amendments will be needed in several sections because of the change from housing projects, from the terminology that we're amending. So the bill has a defective effective date. I think that's about it. Are there any comments? Okay, let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2251 SD2 with amendments, noting the excuse of Representative LaPresti and McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. The next item is SB 879 SD1. This is the DHHL infrastructure bill. I'm going to hand it over to Vice Chair Hashimoto.
Thank you, Chair. What we're going to do is we're going to take the amendments made back in our HB 2134 HD1, and we are going to essentially change or add in a section that says the infrastructure conforms to applicable county standards in effect at the time the infrastructure is turned over to the county. So that's one change. And also that the infrastructure is connected or adjacent to infrastructure maintained by the county. Again, this is consistent with what we had in HB 2134 and will allow staff to make non-substantive and technical revisions.
Thank you. So let's, we're passing it as an HD1. Let's take the vote. Oh, any comments? Let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 879 SD1 with amendments. Noting excuse of Representative Lepresti and McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Okay, the next item, SB 2877 SD1. This is the screening fee bill, and I'm going to ask Vice Chair Hashimoto again to describe the proposed changes.
All right, thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is that we're going to take the language from HB 2139 HD1, and we will adopt the language that we put into that HB. And that is essentially, it removes the cap on the amount that you can charge, but it also includes the written request that the landlord or landlord's agent shall provide to the applicant a receipt for payment of the application screening fee upon request. And also that the landlord or the landlord's agent shall return to the applicant any amount of the application screening fee that is not used for the purposes authorized by this section. What we will be adding in is that they must return it within 30 days. So everything else is consistent with HB 2139, and will allow staff to make technical and non-substantive revisions.
Thank you. So let's pass that out as any comments? Okay, let's pass that out then as a HD1. Let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2877 SD1 with amendments. Noting the excusal of Representative Lepresti and McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Okay, the next item is SB 3324. This is the working group for one of our islands with subdivision infrastructure issues. We would like to make a number of changes, and I'm just going to walk you through these. On page 2, line 17, we're going to just switch out community association with homeowner association. On page 3, we are going to just clarify this a bit more on the working group. That they would be comprised of a member of the State House of Representatives who represents the affected district in the affected county. It would also include a member of the Senate who represents the affected district in the affected county. Third, the mayor or designee for the affected county. It would include a representative from the Hawaii Council of Community Associations to be selected by the Senate President, a representative from the Hawaii chapter of the Community Association Institute, appointed by the House Speaker, council members or designees of the affected district in the affected county, a county resident in the affected district appointed by the Senate President, and a county resident in the affected district, appointed by the House Speaker. We just wanted to make it clear who would be on this working group and how they will get appointed to the working group. And then we also, on the same page 3, we just want to add 2 more scope of work for the study group. One is to address the location, condition, and cost of improving and maintaining substandard and deteriorating roads and other infrastructure. And number 2, the development of 1 or 2 homeowner associations. The rest will be renumbered. And finally, on page 4, we would like to add language that there will be appropriation out of the general fund, blank amount, to establish this working group determine infrastructure repair, maintenance costs, and develop a homeowner association. And it would be matched by the affected county. The amount that out of the state general fund would be matched by the county. So we would like to add in the committee report that the estimated cost would be out of the general fund would be $250,000. Okay, that would be in the committee report. Are there any questions, comments? Okay, then let's pass this as an HD1. Let's take the vote.
All right, recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 3324 SD2 with amendments. Noting the excuse of Representative Lepresti and McDermott, any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no, with all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Next up is SB 2667 SD1. This is the Front Street bill. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Hashimoto to discuss the proposed amendment.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is we will actually adopt what we placed in HB 1917 HD1, which essentially again moves shall to may and also removes the date certain, and so it'll be unlimited time frame for this to happen, which will allow HHFDC to meet some of the requirements as outlined in their testimony. Will allow staff to make technical and non-substantive revisions.
Thank you. So we're passing this out as an HD1. Any comments? Let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 2667 SD1 with amendments, noting the excuse of Representative Lepresti and McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no, with all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. The next item is SB 3247 SD2. This is relating to the Hawaiian Homelands waitlist. And I would like to, we passed out a summary of the proposed amendments to this bill, page 2, line 3, section 1. We'd like to add this language that the legislature also finds that according to the DHHL Beneficiary Study Applicant Report 2020, 76 of the applicants prefer a lot with a single family home or vacant lot. About 16% of the applicants prefer a rental, such as a single family home, duplex, townhouse, or apartment with an option to buy. Also on page 2, line 3, we'd like to edit to read, the purpose of this act is to require the DHHL to address the housing preference requirements of those on their wait list. On page 2, line 6, section 2, we would like to delete and add this language that DHHL shall develop a 5-year strategic plan to meet this preferences of number 1, and that's the 76% of individuals who want the single family home, and number 2, the 16% of the individuals on the wait list who want some rental unit. The strategic plan shall also include recommended waitlist policies when homeowner applicants receives a mortgage or down payment assistance from DHHL, and renter applicants opt to live in rental housing developed by DHHL. We also would like to add that DHHL shall submit the strategic plan, including any proposed legislation, to the legislature by December 10th, 2022. So those are the recommended amendments. We'd like to pass that out as an HD1. Are there any comments? Okay. Then, and I think part of the reason for doing this is to address some of the AG's concern about the current language in the bill that might result in future litigation. Okay. So we'd also like to add some technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. If there are no comments, let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 3247 SD2 with amendments, noting the excuse of Representative Lepresti and McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no, with all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, members. The next item, the final one, is SB 206 SD2 relating to rental discrimination. I'm going to also hand this over to Vice Chair Hashimoto.
Thank you, Chair and members. We actually circulated a working draft for you to review. If you could just bear with me as we go through this. So there's changes to the preamble in section 1, and We also adding another chapter consistent with 206, but it's a little different in the chapter. And so the discriminatory practices in a rental transaction based on source of income. It shall be a discriminatory practice for a landlord to, one, indicate in any manner used to advertise the availability of a rental property that the landlord will not rent a property to a person participating in a housing assistance program. Two, discourage in any manner a person from seeking to engage in a rental transaction based on the person's participation in a housing assistance program. Three, refuse to engage in a rental transaction with the person because of the person's participation in a housing assistance program or requirements related to participation in a housing assistance program. Or four, require rental conditions that are different from those required from a person not participating in a housing assistance program. So I do want to note that a housing assistance program is defined, and that it means a Section 8 housing choice voucher program or any permanent supportive housing program. And rental transaction means any part of the process for the rental or lease of a premises for residential purposes. We also added in a robust exemption section that will be in section 3, which means that previous section does not apply. We will leave in that the landlords who are determining in a commercially reasonable manner the ability of a potential tenant to pay rent by verifying the source and amount of income of the potential tenant, or evaluating the stability, security, and creditworthiness of the potential tenant, or any source of income of the potential tenant. B, to landlords with ownership of no more than 6 dwelling units in the state at the time of the alleged discriminatory rental transaction. However, if an owner, whether individually or through a business entity, owns more than a 10% interest in more than 6 dwelling units in the state at the time of the alleged discriminatory rental transaction, the exemption in this section shall not apply. C, to landlords in a case where a source of income is not approved within 21 days of a person's submission of a good faith request for tenancy approval, which shall include the inspection of a unit. D, to the rental of a housing accommodation in a building with which contains housing accommodations for not more than 2 families living independently of each other, if the owner or the lessor resides in one of the housing accommodations. Or E, to the rental of a room or up to 4 rooms in a housing accommodation by an owner or lessor if the owner or lessor resides in the housing accommodation. And F, to the rental of affordable housing projects subsidized with public funds or lands. And finally, the remedies section, we changed the remedies section to read, any landlord that violates the provisions of this section may be fined up to $2,000 as a civil penalty if determined by the court to have violated this section for the first time within 1 year of the occurrence of the alleged violation. The court may impose a $2,500 penalty against the landlord for any subsequent violation of this section by the landlord. The court may also order any injunctive or other equitable relief as it deems proper. No landlord shall be fined more than once for the same violation, and no party shall be awarded attorney's fee or costs in any action under this section. The fine shall be deposited into the general fund. I should note this is the effective date is July 1st, 2050, and will allow staff to make technical and non-substantive revisions.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Seeing none, let's take the vote. The recommendation is to pass as a HD1 and to also include the technical amendments.
All right, recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 206 SD2 with amendments, noting the excuse of Representative LaPresti and McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no, with all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.